and welcome to another episode of Search of the Record, a podcast coming to you from the Google Search team, discussing all things search and having some fun along the way. My name's Martin, and I'm joined today by John and Gary from the Search Relations team, of which I'm also part of. Also, thanks to everyone listening out there, we have just passed our 2 million downloads mark with this podcast, and we are really excited about that. And thank you all for your continued attention and all the feedback that we are getting for our podcast. This has been much appreciated. All right. Speaking of feedback, today I would like to talk to you two wonderful people here in this recording setup, Gary and John.
Please don't call me people.
You are a people, so deal with that. You're a cat, to our resident cat. I don't know. Are you still a cat? I have no idea what you are these days. Anyway, I would like to talk about a LinkedIn post that you made, Gary.
Oh.
The one where you asked like what people want to see on the blog. And it's not the blog, admittedly, but I really like the questions or the suggestions we got there.
Okay.
So I'll start with one question that was particularly interesting to me because I would like to hear your answer to that, which came from Hendrik Wikström. He asked about all the drawbacks of client-side rendering like crawl rate, indexing speed, risk of not showing all the content for search engine, etc. I think there should be an article about all the potential drawbacks and suggested solutions for them. And you said, not bad for the question or for the suggestion, but Martin will kill me, though. I promise not to kill you, okay? But what do you think are the drawbacks of client-side rendering?
I mean, let's start with the most basic thing.
If you now say JavaScript...
You are doing this because you have JavaScript. And JavaScript is doing something that is too resource-intensive, for example. And then you have to end up with something silly like client-side rendering that might affect crawl rate, indexing, speed, risk of not showing all the content for search engines. Now imagine if you moved all that into HTML and then you don't have this problem anymore. How about that?
What if you copied and pasted a JavaScript code into Bard and told it to create HTML for it?
Ooh.
Okay, I have to try that.
I didn't see that coming while Gary is trying it. I find the question super interesting because I am dealing with it from a very ambivalent position, which is, on one hand, there are still enough SEOs out there that say like, no, don't do it. It doesn't work for Google. Your content will not show up, which is not true. And even Gary, you would have to argue that it's true that we do render JavaScript and that the content does show up and get indexed unless there is a problem with it particularly, right?
Sure.
Here's the key. So that's the key. So there isn't an inherent problem. However, what you mentioned and what the question mentioned is all the potential problems that are coming in. And all of these problems are valid. It's true. If you have JavaScript that can potentially fail, especially because it might actually make network requests or something that can also fail, then that can bring problems about. But I would argue that I'm not sure if I agree with Gary. I would argue that if you have like a PHP thing, for instance, that generates something from a template in a database and that database connection fails, then your server spews out incomplete HTML to begin with. Gary, you look like that the Bard thing has done something that you didn't expect. What happened?
So the prompt was, interpret this as HTML. Document write, hello meow, and p tag. And Bard spit it out. The following HTML code will be generated. P, hello meow, and p.
Oh my. So simple JavaScript it can actually do.
So you're saying we should replace rendering with Bard?
No, no.
But Gary, there's actually an interesting question that I think needs a slightly more nuanced answer that is part of this, which is the crawl rate issues or like delay issues that keeps popping up. And I'm not sure how relevant that really is. Like, I mean, risk of not showing all the content, again, that can also happen with a server-side rendered solution if the server-side rendered solution is not set up correctly. And the same goes for a client-side rendered solution, even though the client-side rendered solution is probably slightly more brittle. But crawl rate, does that have any implications on crawl rate if it's client-side rendered versus server-side rendered?
I mean, I don't think so. I don't think I understand client-side rendering enough to make a call about that. I did something related to server-side rendering back when I was still young and innocent. And I thought JavaScript is a good idea.
So 6 months ago?
No, this was probably 2008 or 2007 or something like that. And I was using a headless Firefox, I think, for server-side rendering. And that wouldn't have any implication on scroll rate. Client-side rendering, I don't even know how that works, to be honest.
Okay.
If you want to enlighten me, then I can give you maybe an answer.
Am I allowed to enlighten you? Because I am burning to enlighten you on this.
Yes, please enlighten me.
Okay. So the way that it works is you have the HTML that contains a piece of JavaScript. That JavaScript needs to obviously be fetched. So yeah, sure. That JavaScript piece then actually executes and makes additional requests to, for instance, an API, gets some JSON back, and then generates HTML from that JSON.
So it's JavaScript.
So it's kind of like CSS and script files or something, like extra requests.
It's extra requests. It's also specifically extra requests because it needs to get the API response to actually generate the content. So there's like one extra request, maybe 2 or 3, depending on how your API is structured.
Wait, I'm confused. How is that different from like any other JavaScript that writes content?
Well, I mean, JavaScript could, for instance, just inject additional content or actually move content around on the page. In that case, it wouldn't really count as client-side rendering because the content is there to begin with. But if the HTML is empty and then pretty much all the content is pulled from somewhere and the template lives in the JavaScript as well, then that is what I would call client-side rendering classically.
Right, so old GWT, like Google Web Toolkit, that would be client-side rendering.
I would argue, yeah.
Okay. I don't think it's different. So I think there the bigger problem is that we will have to render everything and we can't have fallback because the fallback is empty HTML, right?
Correct, yeah.
And like personally, I would not risk that. Like I would want to always have HTML and content in the response body, mostly because I know that rendering can go wrong and it can produce sometimes errors, in which case we are just not going to write it to the index. And then if you don't have a fallback, then you basically don't have anything in the index.
Yep. And that's exactly where potential delays come from. So if you have like a successful rendering and we index the content and then we have an unsuccessful rendering and then we're like, ooh, what happened here? So we might not get the updated content because it didn't render in this instance. And then we would have to wait until the next crawl. And if the next crawl comes in a week, then yeah, not great. I don't know. Are we adjusting the crawl schedule based on failed renderings or something?
I doubt it. I don't think so.
Okay. So that's it for the client-side rendering. I do think it does still have value because it allows you to do much more interactive applications, and I'm querying or questioning the value of necessarily indexing application content. But if you would build informational websites, then I don't think client-side rendering is your best strategy.
Cool.
Anyway, there's another really nice question that I saw, and I'm just asking them to see what you're going to...
Wait.
Huh?
I want to ask a question now.
Oh, you want to ask a question?
Yeah.
What do you want to ask?
This is specifically for John. How do you weight value links?
Oh, man.
Would it be like a ton of links?
Oh, my God. This is why we don't have John on the podcast too often. Okay, back to you, Martin.
Oh my God. So my question is similarly relevant, which is Dan Brickley asked us actually. Google Search has heard more than anyone ever about what billions of people want on a daily basis for decades now. What has it learned, if anything, about humanity and its needs, hopes, fears, etc. from all of this? What have we learned?
So if you don't know, Dan Brickley is a friend of ours, and apparently he hates us with these questions. Or based on these questions, he hates us. What did Google Search learn over the decades? Well, I think we know that people love navigational queries.
Really?
Yeah.
I do that all the time too.
Do they forget what URL Amazon is at, or?
I'm old, so it's...
Same.
Like I go to Google and search for Google. No.
Stop lying.
Not that bad. But sometimes you just don't know what the actual URL is supposed to be. And it's like bookmarking things in a browser is just terrible.
Yep.
So sometimes it's just like, couldn't be bothered with typing .com. It's like you just hit the company name, hit enter, and then click.
Yeah.
Okay, true.
It's not even so much like I forgot what the URL is. It's just like it's easier. We're all old, I guess.
Oh god.
What else did we learn?
I don't know. I always find the year in review videos that the marketing team does pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, I always start them and it's like, oh, this is going to be like traditional marketing, blah, blah, blah. But it's still kind of like, oh, you see, like people are searching for things that actually happened over the year. And I search for some of that stuff as well. Like, especially during the Corona times, it's like, oh, can you shake people's hands? Or like, how often do you wash your hands kind of thing, where everyone now is like, nobody washes hands anymore. Like, why?
What do you mean no one washes hands?
Please. I was about to say, what?
You wash your hands? Oh my gosh.
Oh God, please don't tell me that comes as a surprise to anyone out there.
No, but like the totally exaggerated, like how many times a day you wash your hands kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Or it's like you go shopping and you wash your vegetables. And it's like, or you put them in like in, well, of course you wash them, but it's like like everything that
Wait, what?
that
You wash your vegetables?
The bathtub.
Okay, let's move on to other questions that people asked. For instance, Tom Shahar asked us the reason why 410 response codes are showing the same as 404s in GSC. So 410 is HTTP gone, right? And 404 is not found.
Yeah.
So why are we treating them the same?
I know why.
Tell me.
It's because they both start with a 4.
No, that's not it.
And no, it's mostly because the Search Console team decided to do it that way.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to have fewer categories.
Oh.
So it's like for most people, it doesn't matter which one. So Search Console is like, oh, we will just pick one and show it. And then there are people who understand status codes and they look at it and they're like, oh, but I returned 404.25674.
What?
What?
And you're rounding it up to 404.
What? Okay, but wait, does that mean that just that Google Search Console shows it as the same thing and we treat it differently in the backend?
No.
Well, treat it differently in the backend is a different question, but Search Console decides to show it that way.
But
Gary
also
says no to the backend thing.
But also in the backend, we don't treat them all that differently. So basically, what Search Console is doing is actually the appropriate thing, and it reflects how we internally in crawling and fetch ingestion, we think about these 404, 410 status codes. So I think that's working as intended from our perspective. It is confusing if you think about the standards perspective, but otherwise, like from technical point of view, from our side or implementation point of view, that is pretty much how we just deal with them.
Okay, that's very good to know.
We have other status codes as well that are treated similarly. Like, for example, the 429 and 503, for example. I think 429 is I might be wrong and it's not that status code, but I think it's 429. Only if we had a search engine we could use to look it up. 429, too many requests, and we treat that similarly to 503, and I think also 500. So we could, or I would be actually surprised if we didn't treat them the same in Search Console.
Oh,
okay. Worth trying out. It's like, how many times can you trigger this request before your server tells Google to take a break?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to ask all the questions. Does any of you want to pick a question, or do you want me to pick the next question?
The Web3 thing, how would Web3 affect SEO?
Did you see my reply to that?
Oh, this is specifically about Web3 hostings. My understanding, which might be wrong because I'm not a crypto brother, sorry, is that a lot of these Web3 addresses are essentially top-level domains that were made up. So it's like you have .eth, which I don't know. I don't think that's a country code top-level domain. But it's for one of the types of cryptocurrencies. And I think someone is selling domains .eth. And it's basically a made-up top-level domain. So you can go to their service and look up what it means. But since it's not an actual top-level domain, like we can't crawl it. We can't index anything there. Even if you have a browser plugin installed that does something with that made-up top-level domain, like Google doesn't know what it's trying to do. So from that point of view, it's basically almost like a vanity name that people are just using and treating it as a domain name, but it's actually not a real domain name.
That feels like the Onion network, like the Tor network.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing.
Oh.
Like it's a top-level domain.
Why did we need another one?
Sorry?
Why did we need another one?
Oh, because it has to use cryptocurrencies. Onions are not as cool, But of course, there's a garlic cryptocurrency. So maybe you could use garlic domains instead of onion domains, and then we could keep the same theme.
Okay. I'm yet again impressed with the internet. Good. So basically, there's no effect on crawl budget because we just can't crawl it whatsoever. So
it's pretty efficient in that case, right? It's like if you link to this made-up top-level domain, it's not going to load your server and saves energy.
I should probably dig into this because I don't understand how or why people do it.
Gets you attention, I guess, as well. I haven't seen as much built on Web3 systems so far. So I guess if it becomes a big thing, then we'll figure it out and investigate further. We also have a past episode on Web3 where we cover a little bit of the basics and figure out that amongst the three of us in the podcast, we weren't sure which definition to apply because it's a very, very fuzzy definition as well.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
Okay, I do the next question.
Okay.
So Baptiste Wallerich is asking, if you had to rebuild a search engine differently from Google, what would you do differently? And that reminded me of Steve.
Steve! We haven't talked about Steve in a while, have we?
Exactly. And what happened to Steve?
Yeah, what happened to Steve?
Why are we not talking more about Steve?
Does Steve have a chat engine?
Oof.
And this is why we are not talking more about Steve.
Maybe we should launch Steve at some point.
So what would you do differently to get Steve finished and finalized?
To get Steve what?
To get Steve launched.
I would hope that the service that it offers is better than what other search engines can offer. And I would prefer not to rely on aggressive marketing to make it take off, but rather show it people and then use their own reasoning to make it more popular. So basically, if it's a good product, then I would expect that people start using it.
Isn't that a bit naive?
Well, that's my middle name. Thank you very much.
No, I mean, it's always tricky. Like we always tell people, like you should make a good website and then people will link to you.
Oh, and that's naive?
Well, I mean, does it happen like in practice? I don't know. Like sometimes, sure, but you also have to do a lot of work to get people to try it out, right?
Yeah, but for example, you are not doing heavy advertising everywhere, and then you basically just annoy people with the heavy advertising that you are doing.
I think it's a really tricky balance, though, because if you don't do enough advertising, then you will just not be seen because there is a lot of advertising in people's face already. But you're absolutely right. If it's too heavy a campaign, then people will be annoyed by it. There used to be like this one, I think it was like a project management tool or something that had so many ads everywhere that pretty much out of spite, I didn't even try it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you would make a good search engine. I feel this answer is unsatisfactory. We need more details. Like, how would you make it better?
Well, yeah, that's. I think that's my original question. Like, why are we not talking more about Steve, and how are we improving different aspects of Steve? Because we talked about in an episode about using speed and user experience in Steve.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What else? I know that it came up at least in 2 episodes, but I don't actually remember.
I think we had the basics, like some sort of reputation management based on how much it gets quoted and stuff. I think like that was like a basic thing that we wanted as well.
Yeah, we should probably bring it up more because it's very nice to talk about a search engine that's not real and then explain using that search engine some concepts. I still think this was a genius idea from John.
It was, absolutely. But this question sounds like a lot as a Make-A-Wish Foundation kind of thing where I can just like ask for anything I want. And what I would like, for instance, is a search engine that takes into account some sort of social, what do you call that? Social...
signals.
Social signals. Like, for instance, if the search engine knows who I am and who I hang out with and what we collaboratively like, and I can basically say like, ooh, I really like this restaurant, and then someone else looks for a restaurant, then they should probably see the restaurant that I like as well, slightly higher up in ranking results than elsewhere, because it's likely that if we hang out a lot together, then we could do that in Steve, I guess. But I don't know how to make sure that people can't game that system. No idea.
Well, it sounds a lot like Google Plus. Not.
I had a oh my god! I had a feeling you would say that. Oh, come on! No, not like that. Better
than Google Plus.
More modern.
I think it's fantastic that some of these ideas kind of return, and everyone's like, oh, maybe if we did something like a ×2 button in the search results.
God, no. What I'm trying to say is like this word of mouth kind of marketing, bringing that into a search engine, I think is an interesting idea. I know that has been explored in some way in Google Plus, but we know that better than Google Plus is a very low bar.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that we might face with Steve, if we are going down that route, is that, well, a couple of things. One is that those routes that we have to social platforms are or can be closed without notice at any time. That's a big issue because, for example, if you start relying on chirper.com and you are ingesting signals from there, and then overnight they close the fire hose that we have, then we don't have that signal anymore. And then your results will be potentially worse because you don't have that fire hose anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's one problem. The other problem is that many of the things that people put up on these social platforms are actually not public. And then if they are not public, I think that they should stay not public. Like, it should not be ingested by Steve and then used for just that one user. So once again, you wouldn't improve. Well, technically, you would only improve for users who are using one specific social platform.
Okay, yeah. But then also there's a problem that social platforms are something that Steve doesn't really necessarily have control over, and we need to trust these social platforms.
Right.
Because if we can't trust them to do good curation, then I could just be paid to write good things on places I've never been to, or on things I bought, or on articles I read.
Oh, you mean like everywhere else on the internet?
Yeah. And I think with social, that is particularly annoying because it could be such a nice, strong signal. But if we can't trust it, then obviously it cannot.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, yeah.
So a slightly different question. Do you want the search results more dynamic, more colorful, or do you prefer just the results?
Do you mean by more colorful, like with images and maps and stuff interlinked?
I mean, from my point of view, it feels like just a personal preference, but you want more color, Martin. Less color.
I don't know. I guess it depends on what I'm trying to do. If I'm just trying to look something up real quick, then no. But if it's a topic that is broad and I have no idea, or if I've like heard a word and was like, what is that? And then I search for it and then I found out, oh, it's a location, it's here. Then having a maps link is really nice. Also, if it's like a point of interest, then it might be nice to have images or videos of it, so that I'm like, interesting. I didn't know it's a archaeological site of importance. Stonehenge. What's a Stonehenge? And then you type it and it's like, oh, it's okay. Okay, it's there. It's a place. It's a location. Here are images. Here are videos. Here's a Wikipedia article. That mix is nice.
Yeah, I think that's all right. basically depends on the context, whether you should get more colorful results or not. I think there needs to be a balance as well, because you can certainly overwhelm people with too colorful results. Like, for example, if you are searching for something of great import, then if you start showing images, videos, maps, ratings, whatever, and then the 10 blue links, then suddenly it will just look cluttered, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily something that most people like.
So there needs to be a balance. As with everything, there needs to be a balance. All right. So those were some of the questions that you got asked, or the things that people would like us to talk more about. I think that has been very interesting. And I agree we should bring back Steve, and we should probably look into some of the other things as well a little more. If you're interested in these things that we talked about today, there are other podcast episodes. We also have a YouTube channel with lots of content, and we have a blog on developers.google.com/search, along with our documentation. So there's a lot more that you can dive into. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Gary, for being here and having this little chat with me. And with that, that's it for this episode. In the next episode, we are going to talk about indexing problems and people who say, my site isn't indexed, and what they can do about things that are not going so well. We've been having fun with these podcast episodes, and we hope that you, the listener, have found them both entertaining and insightful too. Feel free to drop us a note on Twitter at googlesearchc, or chat with us at one of the next upcoming events that we go to if you have any thoughts. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and goodbye.
Bye.
Arrivederci.